Hello, class. So today we're going over the literature review. So you should have hopefully already seen the video about what your assignment's going to be for the second project. And it's a proposal and it's a bibliography. And part of that, and then to the bib is pretty easy. It's pretty self-explanatory. I go over that pretty well in the video. But in this one, we're going to go over what a lit review is and why it's part of the proposal. So let's get into it. So a lit review is just there to kind of discuss what is already happening with your particular subject or area. Think of it as getting all the pieces of a puzzle that you're putting together. And it can be honestly a simple summary or a synthesis of sources, which we'll talk about synthesis in another video. But basically, you're kind of just summarizing let me summarizing what is happening. And unlike other assignments that you have in class where you make an argument about something, not necessarily in the lit review, it just means literature review, right? You're reviewing what is happening in your given topic. And so that is what the whole point is about is but of course before you can even do this, you have to find your sources, which is the first part. So, how is it different from a research paper, though? Like I said, an academic research paper, normally you would do a argument or you would have a point to make. But at a lit review, not so much. It's all about summarizing everything that you've read so far. And that's it. It's like proposing, hey, I want to look into electric cars. And I've found that electric cars are this, this, and this. And these articles are telling me that this, and this. And I think it'll be a very good and worthy discussion to have. And that's basically what you're going to be doing, but in written form. And that's it. That's the proposal, and that's the literature review. You're just telling us, the reader, why it's an important thing worth doing, and why it's something that you want to do specifically, right? And what you found. But before you start, a couple of things to mention. Roughly how many sources should you include? Of course, for my paper, you'll have 10. For others, you might have some different. What types of sources are allowed? Can you do books, journal articles, websites, et cetera, et cetera? You know, for mine, you could do pretty much anything, but you at least had to have at least 5 journal articles. Should you summarize, synthesize, critique your sources by discussing a common theme or issue? And that's kind of the thing you're looking for is that what is the common theme between all of the sources you found? And that's why it's important to have a really good research question because if you have a good one, it keeps you on track as to what kind of sources you should be finding. If you're just grabbing a bunch of stuff from everywhere, it's going to be really hard to find a common theme. But if they all have the idea of like, so electric cars, and maybe you found something about diesel cars and why they're better, and then this other source is about electric cars and just the general information, and this other source is about electric cars and why they're better than diesel cars, and et cetera, et cetera, you can start to make connections between all of those sources. And that's important because when you start to write your research paper proper, those are going to be the things that you're going to bring up in your paper to support your given argument. Should you evaluate sources? Should you say that this source is a lot better than the other source, or is this a source that you think would really be a good, strong source to support your paper? That's great. That's fine to do. Should you provide subheadings and other background information such as definitions or history? So the idea of being like, do you have to give a little bit of history or like explanation of your topic? So maybe it's a really new thing, right? It's a new cutting edge field thing that you're doing in the medical field. And you're like, and I might not know what that is, and maybe many people might not know what that is. So you might have to give some explanation as to what exactly you're talking about and how new and prevalent it is in the medical field and why it's something that you think is worth discussing. Totally fun to do there. Or maybe you have a quick history. Now, don't get too caught up in the history. Like if you're doing like something like electric cars, you don't have to go to talk about the Model T car from Ford back in the 1930s and how cars were so great back then or whatever, and then you go back through the decades. That's too far. You don't need to do that. But it's just a quick rundown of a history of like maybe electric batteries and how they're becoming so popular in the last 10 years. That might be okay to do for this lit review. Also, a big way to just find what it should look like is to find models. Find models of what a proposal or a lit review will look like. I've given you one in modules, as you saw in my other video about the assignment, but there's others you could find easily with a Google search on just lit review examples, and you'll find a ton of them. Narrow down your topic is just something that is very important to do for this assignment overall. You don't want to have a really broad topic. It's going to be really tough to find good sources and make a good argument if it's your topic is too broad. You want to make it as narrow as possible. One thing I mentioned in my previous video and in the assignment too is that say you're talking about digital privacy on social media, right? And that's a good topic, but if I left it at that, it'd be way too broad. Just, oh man, there's so many social media apps these days, right? There's Instagram and Twitter or whatever the dumb name it is called, and um, Facebook for, all the generations or whatever the case, right? There's a ton. And so the idea is like, well, which one do you want to look at specifically? So maybe it's say, Facebook, maybe it's Twitter, Blue Sky, whatever, right? Maybe it's Instagram, maybe it's TikTok. It doesn't matter. But you want to pick one and then maybe explain like why is that good for maybe teens? Maybe you're looking at teen population with this social media app specifically, or maybe you're looking at young adults like college level, or maybe you're looking at old generation, whatever. But that's the idea. Instead of saying like all people on this app, that's also too broad, right? From the ages of 10 to 50, that's too much. Maybe you should want to do like teens. And also consider whether your sources are current. This is important, especially if you have a digital technology, something that's new like AI. If you find an article from the 1950s about artificial intelligence, it's probably out of date. It's probably not going to be very relevant to your topic or to your interest. Even AI might be too, like 2015 might be too, that might be too far from the AI that we have currently. So you find current articles. It might be, depending on your topic, of course. If you're talking about like maybe books, maybe finding something from the 1980s might be all right because, if you had books for a very long time, it just depends. If your topic is really new, social media, AI, stuff like that, probably want as current as possible. So like 2021, 2022, right? If your stuff is like a little older, maybe it's plastic bottles, maybe it's solar energy, you might find stuff from 2005 being okay, right? It just depends on what your topic's going to be. So strategies with the lit review and developing it. Don't think of it as just a short list that you're going to bring into the proposal where you just summarize each source. That's what the annotated bib is. No, no. It's about you combining all of these sources to like after you've read them all and figuring out, okay, this is what all my sources are saying, and this is what the topic is going. This is the current trend about this, whatever it may be, right? So maybe explain maybe the history behind it and why it's something that is controversial. Maybe do something like gun laws and you're saying and you don't know what your argument is, maybe you're for or against, you don't know, but whatever the case is, you still want to explain why it's a controversy, why we have the current gun laws we have in the US, and maybe like why there's proponents for and against gun laws, that kind of thing. Do sources present one or different solutions? Do they have a solution at all for maybe the topic? Might be something to consider because maybe that solution is going to be something that you want to push forward, right? Maybe one of the sources say, hey, this is how we solve plastic bottles in the oceans. And that's kind of what you want to follow. Is there an aspect of the field that's missing? That might be something where you're going to include, like maybe they talk about plastic bottles, but maybe they don't talk about plastic bottles that is affecting ocean life. Maybe a certain ocean life, maybe like turtles or fish or something, right? Do the reveal your sources reveal a trend in the field? Maybe there's a certain thing happening, right? That's something you really want to capture. Maybe there's like with AI and maybe AI art, right? Maybe a lot of artists are like, oh, I hate AI art for this particular reason. That's a trend, right? But maybe people are like, well, yeah, I get that, but AI art is useful for doing silly little things like, or maybe you're not an artist yourself, but you want to have some nice creative thing to do to just make a pamphlet. Great. Maybe that's good for you, but maybe for like what we consider true art, maybe AI art is the worst, right? But that's a trend. That's kind of what you're kind of figuring out in your topic. And is there a raging debate about it, right? Like I said, gun laws, super debate. There's either way you fall, doesn't matter. There's going to be an argument on either side. Whatever the case, afterwards, once you have all this sorted out and you're ready to write your proposal with your lit review, you're going to have a working thesis. And yes, just like anything else, literature reviews have a thesis statement as well. But however, like I said, your thesis isn't going to really argue about one position or another. That's going to be in your actual paper itself. It's really just about a particular perspective on the material. Your thesis might be like, from what I noticed, the trend is happening, is following this, or it's following that, or there's a lot of controversy surrounding it, and here is the controversy exactly. And that's perfectly fine. That's still a thesis statement. It's just not an argument per se, as we would have um, in other papers. Consider organization. Basically, what are the most important things that you notice in your papers that you can mention, and what are some of the things that you want to include in your review? So, like, what order should you present them? Think about the kairos, the timing of your paper, right? What are some ways to, how do you want to organize your paper in what way so that it makes the most sense for the reader? Um, After that, of course, you start composing things. Remember to use the evidence, just like I showed you in the example of the annotated biography and proposal. You will need to use sources and cite them just like you would in any other paper. And then just whatever, if you make a statistics or some kind of claim, use cite that source in that paper. Be selective with your information though. You can't bring every single detail right from each paper. You're gonna have 10 sources, it's too much. You got to be selective. This is why highlighting is going to be important when you're looking for your sources. Be selective with your information. Bring in the stuff that's important that the readers need to know, but that's it, right? The stuff that matters the most. Like I said, it's only going to be 2 pages double spaced, so you might be challenged in being selective. This might be the harder part than you think, right? Because you're like most of the time, your main paper will be 10 papers, but this one not so much. Two, maybe 3 pages, right? For a lit review, and that's it. Use quotes sparingly. You're not really lit reviews isn't really to cite somebody. You don't cite people, by that I mean you don't quote people specifically. You're not using their words to provide evidence or support for your arguments just yet because you're not making an argument. Basically, you just want to bring in that information that they have to say into your paper. So paraphrase their information, right? That's what you want to do. Really avoid quotes in the lit review. Summarize and synthesize. Like I said, this is going to be a big part is to summarize your sources and you're going to synthesize your sources and I'll go into synthesis in another video. So don't worry about that if you're not quite know what that is. But basically it's a connecting all your sources together to see what they have to say with each other. This is really the crux of the paper. It's really a summary of what you found and why you think it's important. Still keep your own voice. It's a lit review is yours. It's your ideas. Although you're bringing information from someone else, it still should be your paper. Use caution with paraphrasing, making sure you paraphrase what they say exactly. Don't change their argument just because you're trying to make it fit into your point. Paraphrase exactly what the author intended. All right, so that's a lit review in a nutshell. Let's get into what I have for you to help you with this. So let's stop sharing this over here. Let's go to modules over here. All right, so this is something I mentioned in the main assignment 2 project. And the first thing you should have done, of course, before starting is this part here, which is look for a research question. And then honestly, that should help you find your sources, right? So once you find your research question, you're just like, okay, now it's time to begin. Where do I start with finding my journal articles? I know you could find, stuff online about, let's just go with plastic bottles, single use plastics. I just like that, right? And so maybe you find some good articles, right, from here, like, oh, cool, cool, this is good. This is why was it 10 facts about single-use plastics and all this stuff and how it breaks down. This is all going to be great for me to use. Okay, great. But he's mentioned 5 journal articles. Where do I find those? So I also mentioned that they're going to find them in the OC Library database. So how do you do that? Well, first we're going to go to Olympic College, right? Just go to olympic.edu. And then here we're just going to type in library. You can type in library. You can also go to academics and go to libraries either way. And that's not Lin Lib. But yeah, let's just do it this way, I suppose. Libraries. And then you go to this page, which is the library homepage on the website. But you want to scroll down a bit and go to this library homepage. Boop. That takes us to the actual database where we can find our journal articles. And this is what you're going to be using at home because, like I said, finding journal articles like through Google, it's going to ask you to pay for them. Do not do that. Don't pay for them. You're already getting access to these through the library, but you have to use this resource here. So let's do the same thing. Single use plastics, or maybe I should do plastic bottles actually because I don't want just plastics. It's going to be way too broad. Single-use plastic bottles. There we go. Okay. And then here we find a bunch of stuff, but let's go to peer-reviewed journal articles here on the left. And then here we have a bunch of articles that we may find. So let's look at this one, Design for Insights from the Use Single Design. Oh, wow, this looks like right up my alley. So here is this. This is not the article just yet. We have to actually get the article from so this is not like a database where we have actually have the articles. This connects us to certain databases, and these are all different databases that have these articles. So let's go to this one because I want to find this article here. Okay, here's the article. Great. Oh, and before we actually start reading the article, because they're pretty heavy, they're pretty, they're pretty dense and they're very credible. They're very important. They're really good for you to use, but they're also not written specifically for students. They're written for other people in that same field of whatever field they're talking about. So maybe this is a science article. No, it's a public health. So environmental research and public health. So they're written for other people in public health. So they might have graphs and figures and data that's just way above your head, and that's okay. That's why we're taking time. Although this one doesn't seem too bad. That's actually kind of nice. But anyways, before you actually start reading the article, read the abstract. Basically, it's a summary of what this whole paper is about. So read this, and if it feels you read it and you're like, okay, all right, great. I think I can use this. Great. Then read the rest of it. If not, you're like, nope, I don't think I'm gonna. This is what I'm looking for. Great. Then ignore it. Go on to the next article and see if that fits. Look at the title, and you're like, oh, okay, cool. I think this is part of what I want to see, and then open it up there. Now, we don't always have access to every article that's listed. Sometimes the list is, but we lists the article in the database, but we don't actually have access to it. So just keep that in mind. But for the most part, sorry, this menu's in my way. For the most part, we should have everything it does list in that database. So again, read the article. Sometimes you have something like this where you're like, oh, where's the rest of it? You'll have to download it as a PDF. And honestly, you should download it as a PDF because you won't have the page numbers unless you do. So here's the article here. And then say I don't know, I read this and I'm like, this is a great article and I want to make sure to use it. Well, you're like, well, where's the page numbers? There should be always page numbers right here. They usually are right here, or up here, right? And so that'll help a lot. That'll be what you'll need to do for citing sources in APA. All right. So let's say that's there. Let's go ahead and go to back to the database, the library database here, because we don't want to go too far. It opens up a lot of all right, so yes, the OC library database. So like I said, these are where you're going to find your journal articles. Now you can use Google Scholar as well, but like I said, if you do that, it won't give you access to them, which is unfortunate. You can do this, of course, inside the school itself if you were physically look there, but it won't work. Um, let's see, plastic and single use. Right. So here, this could work for you. I don't know how to make it work. Please don't send me emails. If it doesn't, you'll have to contact the librarians, is that they'll be able to figure this out. But if it does work, and this might be working for me because maybe I'm logged in through OC, because sometimes it doesn't work for me. But basically, if it does work for you, you should see this on the side, the PDFs here. And these links link you directly to to the actual article itself, like we have here. Awesome. But if they don't have a link, and I'm sure I can find one, like this one right here. Say I wanted this one right here. See how it doesn't have a link? No go. I'm not gonna be able to have access to that. It's gonna, if I try to go through here, it's gonna totally say nope. You can't, you got to buy it if you want access, which don't buy it, of course. One thing that's kind of cool about this though as well is, and it has an over here in the database, OC library database, but this one's kind of really a little easier to use because it's Google. But say I am using this article here, Go to the cite button here and check it out. Your citation's pretty much already done. Bam. All you do need the DOL number though, however. So let's just say I was going to do that, copy that. Where would be the DOL number? Well, if you go to your article itself, here you might have, it usually gives you what the DOL are right here. The DO, I'm sorry, did I say DOL? DOI number. This guy right here. This is the DOI number. So that's the last, think of it as the web address for journal articles. This is what you're going to need to copy and paste over to the final part of that citation. So you would have this citation here, the APA, and then right after the page number, you just put DOI colon, and then that just copy and paste this over here. And this is also, like I said, included in you can find these also here in this database. It's not like it's hard, it's just different. So here's the citation. And then here you go. Oh, this one includes the DOI number. Awesome. So of course you got to use the right citation. Don't use MLA for us. It's going to be APA. Oh wow, it's even better. That's awesome. It used to not be this full. Like I have all of it. This is even better than the Google one. That's great. So you just copy and paste it over. Done. Now this doesn't work for your normal standard ones. Don't bother with that. But that'll work great for your journal articles. And again, you'll need 5 of these. And one of the things that is important is that, like I said, they're pretty good sources to use because they provide a lot of credible evidence to support whatever argument or point you're going to make. But they're pretty also dense and might be difficult to use, or at least read. I want them to be easy to use. You really will have to pay attention to what they say. And some of this, and so honestly, this is talking about examples of proposals. Their introduction of all journal articles, that's what they are. This is their lit review. They're saying they've done their homework. They're citing other people here and showing you that, hey, I've done my homework. I think this is why this is worth doing this research, and this is what I'm going to be doing as well. And see, here's their methods that you would normally have. Is like, this is how we're going to collect data. And then they might not have a timeline, but they're going to have results and stuff. That's fine. And then they get into their actual paper itself. So they're doing the exact same thing I'm asking you guys to do. All these journal articles do. Always after the abstract, of course, the abstract is summary. They all have the introduction. It's basically a proposal and a lit review. They're telling you that they did their homework about the subject. They're not just going into it blind. And this is why they're so credible. This is why they're so dense, though, as well. But this is important for you to know how to use these sources to support whatever argument you want to make. It's vital, and that's why I want you to find at least 5. Now, you can use 10 of them if you want instead of finding other sources, but it is hard because it is a lot of journal articles and it's a lot of reading. As you can see, look at this. It's a lot. And like I said, they're not written for students, they're written for other people in that same field. But you don't necessarily need to understand all the intricacies of the journal article. You don't even understand like what these figures are, but really just get what they found, why the found is important. How is that going to support whatever point you have to make? So like the discussion and the conclusions are going to be probably the best spots to start along with the introduction. And don't worry so much about the actual like the graphs. It's like let them explain the graph for you and then bring that into your actual paper. So last thing I wanted to mention, those are the journal articles you're going to find. Oops, I stopped sharing the whole thing. I didn't want to do that. Let's go back to that, please. I want to just close some of these articles. They just get too cluttered up here and I get distracted. There we go. So the last thing is just to talk about this little well, I guess I wouldn't call it little, but this discussion that we're going to have online, reading the Bedford Researcher chapters 3, 4, and 5. So I mentioned this in the actual assignment. They're going to start with reading chapter 3 and then come up with a research question. After that, I want you to, of course, read chapter 4, and then I have a couple of things that I want you to read, or to, I'm sorry, read, to answer about reading chapter 4. So how did you read sources critically? This is important because after you find all 10 of your sources, you're going to want to highlight things. You're going to want to read them critically. In my next video, I'm going to talk about how to read things rhetorically, which again is reading critically. But what does that mean to you? Kind of explain this thing, right? That's going to be important to basically understand your sources and how you're going to use them. Then you're going to read five, how to assess your sources, right? How are they going to be important to what you're going to support in your paper proper? You're going to have a discussion on that. So you're going to have all of these are going to be included together, by the way. You're going to have a research question here, what chapter four questions here, chapter five questions here. And then lastly, I want you to respond to two of your peers' posts because these are going to be posts that everybody else is going to see. I think that's going to really help you guys, each other, because you're going to help each other through this, seeing what other people are doing, what they're going to be researching, what they found so far about their sources, what they found about after reading chapters four and five. And I want you to look at their research questions specifically and help them out and kind of respond to them. And I gave you a couple of questions to kind of help you get this started with this. You don't need to answer all these questions. They're just there to kind of help you think about what ways can you help each other in developing your research question further. So for instance, could the research question be examined from another perspective? Are there any related questions like how and why that they should maybe ask with that research question? Can your peer find enough credible sources for this topic, right? Maybe this topic, you could let them know like, hey, I don't think this topic is going to be very good for researching. This would be a good point to mention, or maybe you can help them develop it further for it to be a good researchable topic. Can the research question be answered with the scope of your assignment? So maybe the research question is too broad. Mention that. Say like, I think this might be too broad. You're saying social media. Maybe you can pick one. Of course, keep the feedback constructive. Don't just be mean about it. That's not what this is about. Make sure to give plenty of just constructive feedback to your peers, and do this for two peers, and that'll be this for this discussion. So this is a big discussion, but this is the only assignment I'm going to have going throughout this week. It's just this reading the Bedford Researchers chapter 3, 4, and 5. And it'll be worth 30 points. So instead of doing two smaller discussions, I just want to do one big one because it's really tied to our reading. And it's really going to help you develop this proposal and this entity bibliography. So that is what we have for this lesson. As always, let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, we'll call it good here. Thank you so much for joining me with this, and I'll see you in the next video.